I was thinking about something last night. So my grandmother, growing up, hated her first name. Absolutely hated it. And I swear from the moment the woman could speak, and realized that she didn't like her name, she advised her family on this. And let's just say for the story's sake that her first name was Frances, all right? And she hated that name, Frances. So she wanted everyone to call her by her middle name, which for the story we'll say is Marie. So for years, for her entire life, everybody just called her Marie. Every new person that she met, even if they knew that her first name was Frances, well, she would correct them and say, well, actually, I go by Marie. And this went on and on and on. And I remember in the last couple of years that my mother and I were taking care of her before she passed on, we would have PSWs that would come into the house to like give us a little bit of break because we were 24/7 caregivers. So we'd have PSWs come in, and generally we would advise them because they would have documents like paperwork and stuff that would show her first name as Frances. So we would have to advise them, well, she prefers to go by Marie. Oh, okay, no problem. And every so once in a while, one would forget, or you'd have new ones come in and you'd forget to tell them or whatever. And my grandmother never got upset with them or anything like that. Sometimes she'd get confused. I mean, she had dementia in the end, but we generally had no problem advising them, and then the PSWs would use, the name that she preferred to go by. And the thing that was really crazy bonkers is in all the years that my grandmother went by Marie instead of Frances, and all the times that we interacted with people and we had to advise them that she prefers, not a single person ever looked at her and said, well, legally, your first name is Frances, so I'm not going to call you anything else but Frances. I'm not accepting your delusion that you want to be called by your middle name because your parents named you Frances and you have to go by that. It is crazy how we as a society can easily accept somebody telling you, well, I don't like this name and I prefer to go by this. My name is Robert, but I prefer to go by Bob. My name is James, but everyone calls me Jimmy. It is so easy when somebody says, this is what I prefer to be called. Even as, you get people that are like, my name is Richard, but everyone calls me Dick. Even when it's not really a shortened version of that, right? It's almost like it's a completely different name, but somehow it's a shorter version of Richard. But people can accept that. We're able to understand that. I, growing up, had my full first name, and then one day the teacher decided it was too hard because my name was too long, that she needed to shorten it. So I went with a nickname, which proceeded to be my nickname through most of school. And this was like in grade 4 or 5 when the nickname came about, and I went by it for years. And then one day I was like, you know what? I don't want to be called that anymore. I just want to go back to my original name. And people did not have a problem accepting that. Never had a problem accepting that. Despite me being much older and people knowing me for a long period of time, even my family was like, oh, do you want us to call you? And I'm like, no, that's just more of a friend thing. People had no problem seeing that. We have people that change their hair color all the time. People are not a natural blonde or brunette or redhead. They dye their hair. They get plastic surgery done to go from a B cup to a D cup. They get chiseled jaws. They get facelifts. There's so many things that people do to change their body, to avoid aging. And it's all accepted. Nobody's sitting there looking at a person after they've gotten a boob job and said, well, you'll still be a B cup to me always. I don't care what you've done to your body. But why is it that we can accept all of that? We can understand when that kind of thing is done. But as soon as it's attached to somebody who changes their gender identity or changes their name because they've changed their gender, or they start going by different pronouns, or they start, or they say, hey, I'm not straight. I realize I'm gay, or I'm bisexual, or I'm pansexual. Why is it that as soon as you attach the two-spirit LGBTQ, community to it, as long as the moment it's not a straight cis person, then suddenly it is impossible for certain people to be able to accept a name change, a gender change, a whatever. That's what's crazy to me, is that we can accept somebody trying to halt their aging process. We can accept people changing their body. We can accept people dyeing their hair, changing their name from one to a nickname. We can accept that celebrities go by different names. We can accept so much when it's attached to cishet people, but not when it's attached to anybody in the queer community. And I think as a society, we need to start changing the way that we look at things. There should not be this negative belief that anybody in the queer community making changes is suddenly because they're delusional or mentally unwell. That's so ridiculous. Could you imagine telling a woman that decides to dye their hair that they're mentally unwell because they were covering up their grays? Or telling a man that gets calf implants that he's mentally unwell and he should fucking go see a therapist? And like, maybe people do say that, but it's definitely not as often as the amount online that I am constantly hearing from others that sit back and try to erase people's identities and chalk it up to being mentally unwell. So much of that has gone on in the last month in political TikTok has been due to identity erasure. People claiming that, well, you are not trans looking enough, or you're not non-binary looking enough, or you're not indigenous looking enough, or you're not pansexual looking enough, or you're not this or that or whatever, you're not autistic looking enough in the case of some people. Not that one. I will not defend that one. But because there was so much erasure of people's identities, we have now experienced so much fucking harm. And all because people just couldn't accept people's identities. There isn't some sort of little box that people need to fit into. There isn't some sort of checklist that everybody needs to check off in order to fit into a category. You can't sit there and say that Métis people are not indigenous enough because they don't look dark enough or something. That's erasing an entire group of people. You can't sit there and say that somebody's not non-binary enough because they're female presenting. You can't sit there and say that somebody is not queer passing or queer enough because to you, they don't look like whatever stereotype you have in your head for a queer person. Stereotypes are not fucking acceptable anymore. There isn't this thing where we are like, well, a gay guy is going to look like this, or a non-binary person's going to look like that. That just isn't a thing anymore. We've gotten to the point where you have to be able to just accept the identity that people give you. And I think there's so many people that are like, oh, well, what if somebody's lying about being trans? Or what if somebody's... You know what? There is always going to be bad faith actors. There's always going to be people that maybe will attempt to abuse something for their nefarious purposes. But the truth is that for the few people that ever occurs with, there are thousands upon thousands of hundreds of thousands of people that will be harmed more so by you accusing them of being bad faith actors and not being the identities that they saying that they are. So I would rather believe every single person on what they tell me is their identity than worry about a couple of people using it for nefarious purposes. Because frankly, there's always going to be people that do awful things, and they don't need to pretend to be a trans woman or an indigenous person or anything else in order to carry that out. So I think more people need to be open-minded and just learn to listen to people when they tell you who they are. Tell you that this is my identity, this is who I identify as, and just accept it. There would be less problems in this world if people were more accepting, if people were more open, and I think there would be a lot less pain. People don't necessarily need others' acceptance. A lot of us get we'll get hate for who we claim to be, and we don't need that acceptance. But God, the world would be a lot better place if there was less fighting over accepting people's identities. So I really hope the last couple of months will make people sort of rethink the way they look at the world and be a little bit more open-minded and accepting of people.